right, shifting part 2. Let's talk about downward shifting. Hello everybody, it is Tobias Murphy for Murphy Music Academy, and today we are going to go over what we didn't cover in the last video, which was all about shifting, general shifting technique, mostly talking about it shifting upwards, and today we are going to finish that topic and talk about how to shift downwards, specifically if you are using a non-shoulder rest, hand-dominant technique. Now, in the first 5 minutes of the original shifting video on upward shifting, I went over a bunch of preliminaries. Now, all of those still apply to downward shifting, stuff about finger pressure and the thumb's involvement. So if you need a reminder, please go back and watch the first 5 or 6 minutes of the original video because I will not be covering that in this video. We're just going to go over the downward shifting technique. Are you ready to begin? Now, first off, just like when doing upward shifting, when we are doing downward shifting, we kind of split the shifting into two sectors. So in upward shifting, it's sort of from first position to fifth position. The technique is a little bit different once you get past fifth position. So we've got the arm movement that gets us from first position to fifth position, and then the thumb is stuck here, and we're mostly moving from the thumb to get up to the higher positions. Now, of course, it is similar in shifting downwards. The main difference, however, between shifting downwards and shifting upwards, besides the fact that, most people are afraid if they don't use the shoulder rest, they're going to pull the violin away from their neck. The main difference is that instead of doing 1-2, 1-2, you're mostly doing 3-2-1, 3-2-1. Maybe it's a lack of comfort or the general insecurity of doing downward shifts, but for whatever reason, as violinists, we want to cover as much ground as possible in as short a period of time when we are shifting downwards. Now, to start learning the technique, we're going to start with everything you do above fifth position. Now, for shifting down, this time I'm actually going to use the D major scale instead of the B flat major scale, which I used in the first video on upward shifting. This way you get a clearer view of what it's like to shift downwards with your thumb still stuck up on this part of the violin. So using standard violin scale fingering, at the top of a D major scale, your first finger is going to be on a G natural in ninth position. So how do we get from here to an F sharp here on our third finger? Because unlike going up where we go 1 to 1, we now have to go from 1 to 3. So it's going to be a little bit similar to how we did going up, where we stuck the first finger underneath the second finger and then used the rest of the motion to push the finger out of the way. Now, obviously, I can't stick my third finger underneath my first finger, but there is something that we can do that comes pretty close to it. So instead of trying to get the finger underneath the finger that is in our way, as we did in upward shifting, we are now going to try to get it as close to it as possible. So you can even try to see if you can stick your third finger right on top of the nail of your first finger. Now, when you actually perform the shift, don't try to do this. This will make your first finger flat. We don't want to have any of our notes flat. But what you do want to do is see if you can get it as close as possible, just kind of hovering over maybe a half step above it. Now, once you are ready to shift and your first finger is here on its note and the third finger is right above it, ready to pounce down and play the note right below it, what you're now going to do is engage the thumb here and pull the hand down like so. Now, the difference between this and upward shifting is that in upward shifting, we actually gauged the space between each position. Here, you're not actually going to put your first finger all the way down into sixth position, because then you would hear this awful giant slide when you perform the shift. Instead, you're going to get, this is why you want to get that third finger as close to the first finger as possible, because you're just going to go down maybe one note or so below the landing note. So the landing note here is an F sharp. I'm going to try to aim to get my first finger down to something between an F natural and an E natural. So to demonstrate this in very slow motion, here is my starting note, a G natural. And then I'm going to pull down with my thumb and bring it down maybe to probably a flat F natural. There you go, flat F natural. And then my third finger, which is right above it, is just going to slam down right there and replace the note. So in slow motion, this is what a proper downward shift looks like. And I'm in sixth position. Now I just have to rely on my knowledge of hand frame to make sure my second and first fingers get right to their places. The only thing left to do now is to add a little bit of magic fairy dust in the form of loosening up the pressure on the string at the exact right time during the shift down, so we no longer hear that slide. So, or at least barely hear it. And that about covers all of downward shifting from here to here. Which then leads us to, honestly, the most difficult part of downward shifting, which is how do I get from here to here? Now, this is the point in which most people that want to play violin without a shoulder rest, want to learn, they get a little bit scared because they think, if I shift from here to here, how am I going to stop myself from ripping the violin off the shoulder, suffering some tragic violin accident, casting the violin out into the audience? It hits some old lady in the face, and that would just be really, really bad for the violin. Well, it's a good thing I'm here to tell you how to avoid this terrible, terrible fate. Now, just like in upward shifting, the main difference between shifting from here and shifting through here is the initiation of the motion. Up here, it's all around the thumb of the hand, and here, it is all around the elbow. So I'm going to take the most extreme example of the shift so you can understand how it can be done. It's not always going to be this big of a shift, but if you know how to do this one, then you're going to know how to do all of the rest. So I've decided to choose a G major scale for this particular demonstration because this puts my first finger on the C natural in 5th position, which means I now want to shift. I want to make, because downward shifts, you want to cover as much ground as humanly possible while still being clean. I'm going to shoot my hand into 1st position on a 4th finger. The technique for doing this particular shift is similar to the technique we used up here. The difference, of course, besides just pulling from here, is that we can't really get the 4th finger that close to the 1st finger, and also we kind of have a lot farther to travel to get from here to here, and also we no longer have the brace of the violin up here. So we are going to now practice using even less finger pressure as possible, and we are also going to break my previous rule from the other video on shifting of making sure our shifts are as slow as we can possibly get away with. A breakdown of these steps is as follows. So I have my bass finger, which is my 1st finger here on a C natural. I have my landing finger, which is the 4th finger. And as soon as I'm about to shift, my 4th finger gets close to that 1st finger. And then right as soon as I'm done playing this full sound of this note, I let it up almost completely. Now it doesn't come off the string, but it does basically what I call ghosting the string. So it is just lying barely on top of there. There's no pressure. It's less than harmonic level pressure. And then the only friction now between my hand and the neck of the violin is just whatever weight the violin is putting on my thumb. And the great thing about this is that the friction that naturally happens when the violin weight is placed on the thumb can easily be counteracted by the friction that is on your chin on the chin rest. So I don't actually have to squeeze down. I just have to basically be touching the chin with the chin rest, and that's all that's going to happen. That's all that's going to move, and you should just get used to the violin moving like that. So I'm going to play the note. My 4th finger is going to get close to my 1st finger. Right as soon as I shift, I'm going to let up all pressure here and then shoot my hand down here. And as soon as it has room, my 4th finger is going to slap itself into place, and voila, I'm in 1st position. So, for a slow motion breakdown, now, if you perform the shift too slowly, you are going to hear that slide. You can't really hide that big of a slide, but it is a good idea when you are first starting out putting this into scales. You want to practice actually going and hearing that slide just so you get the feel of the technique. And then once you're comfortable with that, then try and speed it up to where you are fast enough and light enough on your fingers to where you don't really hear that slide. Now, of course, I picked the most extreme version, basically jumping from 5th position to 1st position. However, you still use the same type of technique in a lot of other shifts that are a little bit less extreme, that often go still 1 to 3 instead of 1 to 4. So another example of this would be if you were shifting from, let's say, 6th position to 3rd position. So one would be on D, and I want to get to 3rd position, which would be, let's say, a C sharp. I'm still going to have to now travel with my arm instead of with my hands. So So that kind of letting go, moving the hand down, trusting the friction here and the friction here, and then slapping my third finger into place. All of the same technique rules apply. I'm just in a slightly higher position and using different fingers. Anyway, that is it for shifting both upwards and downwards. And please, oh please, if you follow all of my directions, all of my steps exactly as I lay them out, you will be successful in your shifting and you won't have to relearn all this stuff later. And that's always nice. So if you liked the video, then put a like on the video. If you have a question, then put it down below, and I do answer my comments. If you have suggestions for another violin technique that you'd like me to cover and turn into a future video, then please put it down there, and I will do my best to turn it into another one of these incredibly detailed, useful, helpful violin technique videos. Anyway, I have been Tobiah Murphy for Murphy Music Academy, where there is no pleasure in mediocrity. Don't forget to subscribe on your way out, and I'll see you next time.